Spokane is going the way of Seattle, but there's still time to save it if the city is willing to heed the warnings that are being given to it. This segment is brought to you in partnership with our friends over at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. So on the show last week, we talked about this announcement that was made by a celebrity chef who's from Spokane, went out, did his thing, came back, opened up Zona Blanca Ceviche Bar in Spokane, his hometown, was super proud of it. The community was excited about it. Well, he announced last week that he's going to have to close that restaurant down because of what's happening outside its doors, because of the crime crisis, because of the drug crisis and how it's impacting his business. And he pled with city leaders in Spokane to recognize what he called the urgency of what's happening in our downtown. He said, if someone like me, who has been fortunate enough to gain national acclaim and enjoy immense support from this community, is struggling this hard to keep my doors open, I can't begin to imagine what it's like for those who don't have the same privileges. He wrote on Facebook, the challenges we face are real and growing, and if we don't take immediate action to address the safety and well-being of our downtown, many more businesses, especially the smaller ones, will face even greater struggles in the months ahead. He said, now is the time for us to come together and protect what makes Spokane so special. And, we did this story. We talked about, Chad White putting this post up about one council member coming out and saying, we're sorry this is happening, we need to do better, was ignored by the mayor, was ignored by the rest of the council members. Well, Nicole got a hold of Chef Chad White, and we featured an interview with him on yesterday's episode of Sundays with Subscribers, where he talked about really what he was dealing with as a business owner that led him to make that decision.
We've been broken into about 20 times over the last 8 years. Again, I'll admit I wasn't doing my part in calling in every single time that something went wrong, right? Every single time I got to get on the phone, it's another 10, 15 minutes. Sometimes we don't have that time, especially when we're dealing with our customers and trying to give them the service that they need. Often we just shoo the person away and move on. But now we've got pieces of foil flying into our dining room, into our patio. My son crawls around the restaurant until we open the doors. It's just not a very safe place. And we've watched our sales slowly decline. And not at such a rapid pace where I was like, oh, wow, this is a really big problem. I need to address this immediately. It was, okay, I'll keep forking over. I'll take a draw from my 401k. I'll borrow money from my wife. Hey, I'll get you back, so on and so forth. And it's just slowly gotten worse and worse and worse. I believe wholeheartedly, and I grew up with this notion, accountability is love. Our friends and our family, if they're truly our friends and our family, we don't sit idle while they destroy their lives. We hold them accountable to it. So if people are breaking the law and we hold them accountable, what's the worst that could happen?
Amen.
I think the worst that could happen is right now turning a deaf ear, not addressing the situation.
Man, 100%. Accountability is love. And that's the point. I think a lot of businesses in Seattle tried to raise red flags about what was happening here. And these are progressive business owners, liberal business owners in Seattle who, they weren't taking extremist positions. They were basically saying that, look, accountability is love. Accountability is compassion. And they were completely ignored in Seattle. And Seattle for 10 years continued down this path where it was like, look the other way, let people, die with needles in their arm in the alcoves of these businesses. 3rd Avenue, 4th Avenue are basically ghost towns in Seattle, what used to be the vibrant heart of a once wonderful city. And so now I hear this chef, Chad White, totally reasonable guy. You should watch our full interview on Sundays with Subscribers. Totally reasonable guy, just saying what needs to be said. Like, look, what's the worst that could happen if we hold them accountable? What's the worst that could happen if we say either you get help or we're gonna have to arrest you? What's the worst that could happen? You could save their life. They don't die. They don't end up in jail. They don't end up in prison. They don't hurt other people. They don't steal from other businesses. They don't force other restaurants to close down. Really, what's the worst that could happen? And so here you have this guy clearly empathetic. And I think that really was obvious with him. This is someone who loves Spokane, who is filled with empathy and now filled with sadness over what's happening in the city of Spokane. And leaders there have a decision to make. Do they look the other way? Do they ignore people like Chad White, similar to how Seattle ignored business owners and restaurant owners here 5-10 years ago? Or do they say, we're not going down the path of Seattle. We can be progressive if that's what we choose to be. We can be caring and all of these things, but we're not going to let people ruin our city. We're not going to be progressive at the expense of restaurant owners, of business owners who are contributing to our society. We're not going to do that. And that's a choice that only city leaders in Spokane can make and the voters of Spokane can make. You know, one of the things that really saddened me from this conversation with Chef White is the amount of blowback he's gotten for coming out and saying, I'm closing down my restaurant because crime and drug abuse outside has gotten so bad that pieces of tinfoil are flying in the door when we open it. And same thing that happens here. This far left, angry mob gangs up on him on Reddit and all these things. Oh, I bet he's just a bad business owner, can't run a business, so he's just blaming drug users. Come on, it's absurd. So that all signs are that Spokane is ready, willing, and dead set on going down the path of Seattle. I pray to God that someone there speaks up and says, we can't do that. We have to listen to people like Chad White. So if you want to watch that full interview, you can watch it by becoming an Undivided subscriber, undividedpod.com, undividedpod.com. That segment was brought to you in partnership with our friends over at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. Make sure you sign up for their newsletter so you can be alerted to opportunities to get involved and, like we always say, turn your frustration into action.